The Grand Assembly Hall stretched across 3 kilometers of polished crystal, reflecting the light of 1,000 stars visible through the transparent dome above. Representatives from 47 different species sat in their designated sections, each area designed to accommodate the unique physical requirements of its occupants. Some breathed methane, others required high-gravity fields, and a few existed partially in dimensions human eyes could not perceive. This was the Galactic Sovereignty Council, a governing body that had maintained peace across known space for 3,000 years. Elder Magistrate Vexal called the emergency session to order with a harmonic pulse that resonated through every translator in the chamber. His species, the Killer, had been one of the founding members of the council, and Vexal himself had served for over 800 years. His crystalline body refracted light in patterns that conveyed emotion to those who understood the language. Today, those patterns spoke of concern and disapproval. The matter before the council involved humanity, the newest species to achieve faster-than-light travel. Humans had joined just 20 years ago with provisional membership status. They operated only 3 small colonies beyond their home world and possessed technology the council considered primitive at best. Most council members viewed humans as an unremarkable species that would eventually settle into their assigned role in galactic civilization, much like dozens of others before them. But humans had violated Protocol 17. A human survey vessel named the KSEV Taijin had entered the Helix Nebula without authorization. The region was contested territory, claimed by the militant Brecker Dominion. The Brecker had destroyed 2 council science vessels in that area over the past decade simply for crossing their claimed borders. They did not negotiate. They did not warn. They simply eliminated intruders. Ambassador G1 Choi rose from the human delegation section, her small frame dwarfed by the massive chamber around her. She was the only human representative present, as Earth had been granted just 1 seat on the council. The translator collar around her neck converted her words into formats. Every species present could understand. She explained that the Taijin had been conducting mineral surveys in what humans believed was unclaimed space. Their navigation systems were less sophisticated than those of older council members, and Captain Hyan-Woo Park had likely drifted off course. The human government on Earth had already issued formal apologies through all proper channels. They had also recalled every human vessel beyond their 3 authorized systems as a gesture of good faith. Council members projected skepticism through their various forms of communication. The Talori representative, a being that resembled a floating network of bioluminescent filaments, suggested that human recklessness endangered the delicate balance of power in the galaxy. The Velix delegation, known for their cautious nature, argued that humanity needed stricter supervision until they matured as a species. The Brecker ambassador was less diplomatic. His species resembled bipedal reptiles, covered in armor-like scales, and his translated words dripped with menace. He demanded blood compensation for the intrusion into Brecker space. He wanted the crew of the Taijin delivered to Brecker justice. He wanted humanity punished as an example to any other species that might consider violating established territorial claims. Dachi-1 felt her heart race, but kept her expression calm. She had trained for years to represent her species in this arena of ancient civilizations and incomprehensible power dynamics. She argued that the Taijin crew had meant no offense and that Earth would pay reasonable compensation for any perceived violation. She reminded the Council that humanity was still learning galactic protocols and deserved the same patience other young species had received. The debate continued for hours, with various factions presenting their positions. Some wanted harsh sanctions. Others suggested this incident proved humans were not ready for galactic civilization. A few argued for military intervention to prevent future violations. Through it all, G1 stood and defended her species with every diplomatic skill she possessed. Finally, Elder Magistrate Vexal called for a decision. The Council would invoke the ancient right of mandated compliance. Humanity would cease all expansion beyond their current 3 systems immediately. All civilian vessels operating outside human territory must return home within 30 standard days. Earth would submit to a 50-year moratorium on new colonization or exploration. During this period, humanity would be evaluated for their ability to follow galactic law. Any violation of these terms would result in immediate expulsion from the Yang Council and potential military action to enforce compliance. The vote was nearly unanimous. Only the Prolix delegation abstained, citing concerns about restricting scientific exploration. G1 felt the weight of the decision crush down on her shoulders. 50 years. Half a century of forced stagnation, while other species continued to expand and grow. For a young civilization like humanity, this was a death sentence to their ambitions. As the assembly began to disperse, Vexal requested a private meeting with G1 in one of the smaller conference chambers. She followed his hovering form through corridors that had witnessed thousands of years of galactic politics. When they were alone, he altered his light patterns to convey something that surprised her: sympathy. He explained that the Council had actually protected humanity through this decision. The Brecker had demanded much harsher terms. They wanted Earth itself placed under Council supervision. Some extreme factions had even suggested quarantine protocols that would have isolated humanity completely, preventing any contact with the wider galaxy. The 50-year moratorium was a compromise that satisfied the Brecker's honor while allowing humanity to survive as a spacefaring species. Vex Al warned her that the Brecker were not satisfied with this outcome. They would be watching for any human violation, any excuse to demand harsher punishment. The only way humanity could emerge from this situation safely was through perfect compliance. No exploration, no expansion, no violations of any kind. If Earth could demonstrate maturity and restraint for 50 years, they might eventually be accepted as full members of Galactic. Civilization.G-1 thanked him for the explanation and for whatever behind-the-scenes advocacy he had provided. But as she walked back to her quarters to prepare the transmission to Earth, she felt a growing sense of dread. She knew her people. She knew their history. Humanity had never accepted limitations gracefully. They pushed boundaries. They questioned authority. They refused to be contained. She composed the official message, encoding the Council's mandate in the precise legal language required by galactic protocol. She attached her own analysis of the political situation and Vexal's warning about the Brecker. She emphasized the importance of compliance and the consequences of defiance. As she sent the transmission on its way to Earth, traveling through the quantum relay network that would deliver it in mere hours despite the vast distance. G1 wondered how her government would respond. She hoped they would see reason. She hoped they would accept the necessity of patience. But deep in her heart, she knew better. Humanity had spent its entire history fighting against those who tried to limit their potential. She had just told her species that the galaxy wanted them to stop growing, stop exploring, stop being who they were. Gwyn looked out the viewport of her quarters at the stars beyond. Somewhere out there, Earth was receiving her message. Somewhere out there, decisions were being made that would determine whether humanity had a future among the stars or whether they would burn bright and brief like a supernova. Beautiful and destructive in equal measure. The Council commanded calm. But G1 knew her species well enough to fear that calm was the one thing humanity could never truly embrace. 3 weeks after the Council delivered its mandate, G1 received an encrypted message marked with the highest priority codes. The transmission came directly from Earth, bypassing all normal diplomatic channels. She was ordered to establish a secure quantum link for immediate communication with the United Earth Coalition's leadership. She made her way to the embassy's most protected communication room, a space shielded by technology humanity had developed specifically to prevent alien surveillance. As the connection established, two faces appeared on the holographic display. Admiral Su Min Kong commanded humanity's defense fleet, such as it was. His weathered face and gray hair spoke of decades in military service. Beside him sat President Ga-Yoon Kim, elected just 2 years ago on a platform of aggressive space expansion. The president spoke first, her tone formal but warm. She thanked G1 for her service and acknowledged the difficult position the council had placed her in. She explained that Earth's government had spent the past 3 weeks in intense debate. Every nation in the coalition had been consulted. Military advisors, scientists, economists, and philosophers had all weighed in on humanity's response to the mandate. The decision was unanimous. Earth respectfully declined the Council's terms. G1 felt her blood run cold. She tried to maintain her diplomatic composure, but the words tumbled out in a rush. Did they understand what they were saying? Did they comprehend the military might the Council could bring to bear? Species that had mastered technologies humans could barely imagine? Weapons that could sterilize entire planets? Fleets numbering in the thousands? Admiral Kong listened patiently until she finished. Then he asked her a simple question. Had she wondered why the Council was so concerned about one small survey ship entering the Helix Nebula? Why they moved so quickly to contain humanity? Why the Brecker reacted with such extreme hostility? He activated a data file that began playing on her display. She recognized the header codes as coming from the Taijin. But according to all reports, that ship had been destroyed or captured. How did Earth have recent data from it? Kong explained that Captain Hyen-Woo Park was indeed captured by the Brecker. But before they boarded his vessel, he managed to compress and transmit critical data through experimental quantum burst system. The transmission was risky and partially corrupted, but enough survived to change everything. The Taijin had discovered ancient ruins in the Helix Nebula. Not just ruins, but an intact facility containing technology that predated the Council by thousands of years. The structure was enormous, built by a civilization that had mastered physics in ways current galactic species could barely comprehend. And most importantly, the facility contained archives. Earth's best scientists and linguists had spent weeks decoding fragments of those archives. What they discovered turned the accepted history of galactic civilization on its head. The Council's founding was not the benevolent act of advanced species guiding younger ones, as official histories claimed. It was a conspiracy. The founding species had discovered multiple sites, like the one in the Helix Nebula. They found ancient weapons, power generation systems, faster-than-light drives that made current technology look primitive, and most valuable of all, they found knowledge. Instead of sharing these discoveries, they hoarded them. They used the technological advantage to position themselves as the natural leaders of the galaxy. Then they created the Council and its elaborate system of protocols. Prohibition zones were established around every ancient site they discovered. Exploration was carefully controlled. Young species were guided into dependent relationships with older ones. The entire structure was designed to prevent anyone else from accessing the same knowledge that had elevated the founding species. President Kim continued the explanation. Over the past 20 years, humanity had not been idle. They suspected something was wrong with the galactic order, though they lacked proof. So they had pursued multiple covert programs. They established hidden shipyards in the asteroid belt and around the outer planets. They reverse-engineered alien technologies obtained through various means. They pushed their science to limits the Council believed impossible for such a young species. When the Taijin's data arrived, it confirmed their suspicions and provided actual examples of ancient technology to study. Earth scientists had made breakthrough after breakthrough. The moratorium the Council imposed was not just an insult to human ambition. It was an attempt to prevent humanity from becoming a threat to the established order. Admiral Kang brought up schematics and production reports. G1 stared in disbelief at what she saw. Hundreds of military vessels, designs she had never seen before. Weapon systems based on principles that should not exist in human arsenals. Defense platforms hidden throughout the Sol system. This was not the modest defense fleet she thought humanity possessed. The Admiral explained their doctrine. Humanity could not match the Council in traditional military strength. They were outnumbered 1,000 to 1. But wars were not won by technology alone. They were won by will, by strategy, by the willingness to pay the price for freedom. Humanity had spent 2 decades preparing for a conflict they hoped would never come. But if the Council forced their hand, Earth would show the galaxy what humans were truly capable of. President Kim delivered the message G1 would carry back to the Council. Humanity would not accept the 50-year moratorium. They would continue their exploration and expansion. They would investigate the Helix Nebula and any other ancient sites they discovered. They would defend themselves against anyone who tried to stop them, whether that was the Brecker Dominion or the Council itself. If the Council wanted peace, they would negotiate with humanity as equals, not as children to be managed. They would open access to prohibited zones and ancient knowledge for all species. They would reform their structure to allow genuine cooperation instead of enforced hierarchy. If the Council chose war instead, humanity would fight. And in fighting, they would destabilize the entire galactic order. They would reveal the truth about the Council's foundations. They would strike at the infrastructure that maintained Council control. They would create chaos that would make the past 3,000 years of enforced peace look like a brief anomaly in galactic history. G1 sat in stunned silence as the implications washed over her. Her species was about to declare war on the most powerful entity in known space. They were betting everything on secrets stolen from ancient ruins and 20 years of covert military buildup. If they were wrong, humanity would be crushed. If they lost, Earth itself might be occupied or destroyed. But if they won, even partially, they would transform the galaxy forever. President Kim asked G1 directly if she would carry this message to the Council. She would understand if the ambassador chose to resign rather than be part of what came next. There would be no shame in stepping aside. G1 took a long moment to consider. She thought about her years of diplomatic training, her belief in negotiation and peaceful resolution of conflicts. She thought about the comfortable certainty of the galactic order she had learned to navigate. She thought about the safety that came from following the Council's rules. Then she thought about humanity's history. Every advance had come from people willing to challenge limitations. Every freedom had been won by those who refused to accept subjugation. She thought about her own childhood, learning about the revolutions and struggles that had shaped her world. She thought about what it meant to be human. She told President Kim she would deliver the message. More than that, she would advocate for Earth's position with every diplomatic skill she possessed. The Council had made a mistake in thinking humanity could be controlled. They had mistaken youth for weakness. They would learn that humans did not submit easily to chains. No matter how gilded, the transmission ended, and G1 sat alone in the shielded room. In a few hours, she would request an emergency session of the Council. She would stand before representatives of civilizations thousands of years old and tell them that humanity rejected their authority. She would watch their shock turn to anger and then to determination. She wondered if this would be remembered as the moment humanity secured its freedom, or the day they signed their own death warrant. Either way, there was no turning back now. The message had been sent. The decision had been made. One began preparing her presentation to the Council. She chose her words carefully, knowing they would echo through history. Whatever came next, the galaxy would remember. This moment when humanity looked at the stars and refused to be told. They could not reach them. The Council's response to humanity's defiance came swiftly and with the weight of 3,000 years of unchallenged authority. Within 3 days of G1's presentation, the Security Directorate voted to authorize a containment operation. The vote was overwhelming, with only the Prelix abstaining and no species voting against. The message was clear. The Galactic Order would not tolerate this challenge. Fleet Coordinator Vexil, a senior killer military commander, assembled 3 enforcement fleets. Over 200 vessels converged on human space from different sectors of the galaxy. These were not exploration ships or merchant vessels. They were purpose-built instruments of Council power, equipped with weapons that had pacified rebellious colonies and enforced Council law across dozens of systems. The strategy was one refined over millennia. Show overwhelming force. Make resistance appear futile. Give the upstart species a chance to surrender with minimal bloodshed. Most conflicts ended before they truly began. When the targets saw what they faced and chose survival over pride. Commander Bay-Ora Lee watched the Council fleets approach from Baekdu Station, one of humanity's defensive platforms orbiting Mars. Her tactical team tracked every vessel, cataloging their energy signatures and weapons capabilities. The displays showed ships that dwarfed anything in the human fleet. A single Council cruiser outmassed 3 human destroyers. Their shield generators radiated power that could vaporize continents. Yet Lee remained calm, following her orders precisely. Observe. Record. Do not engage unless fired upon. Let them think they understand what they face. The Council fleet established a perimeter around human-controlled space. They broadcast ultimatums demanding immediate surrender and compliance with the original 50-year moratorium. They set a deadline, 72 hours for Earth's government to accept terms. After that, they would begin seizing human installations by force. Admiral Kang held a fleet-wide conference from his command ship hidden in the Kuiper Belt. Dozens of captains appeared on the secure channel, their faces showing the tension of knowing what was about to begin. Among them were Captain So-Jin Park, known for her aggressive tactics, and Captain Tae-Yong Kim, whose methodical planning had earned him respect throughout the service. Kang outlined the plan. They would not defend static positions where the Council's superior firepower would crush them. Instead, they would use mobility, deception, and the element of surprise. Let the Council think they understood human capabilities. Let them believe their intelligence reports about Earth's modest defense fleet. Then show them the truth. The Council made their first move against Proxima Station, humanity's oldest colony beyond Sol. 30 ships entered the system, more than enough to overwhelm what they expected to find. Their sensors detected 12 human frigates moving to intercept, a token resistance force that would be swept aside quickly. The human ships scattered as the Council fleet approached. To the alien commanders, this looked like panic. They pursued, confident in their superior speed and firepower. Their formation stretched out as faster ships pulled ahead, eager to claim the first victories. They did not realize they had been led into a carefully prepared killing field until it was too late. From behind the ice moons of Proxima's outer system, over 100 human vessels emerged from stealth. These were ships the Council had never seen before, designs that should not exist in humanity's arsenal. They moved with impossible agility, accelerating at rates that would turn organic crews into paste against their bulkheads. But humans had solved that problem with technologies reverse-engineered from sources the Council would never have shared willingly. The engagement lasted 17 minutes. Human ships attacked in coordinated swarms, dozens of vessels focusing fire on single targets before dispersing and reforming. They used kinetic weapons accelerated to relativistic speeds, simple physics turned into devastating effectiveness. Council shields, designed to stop energy weapons, offered little protection against projectiles moving at significant fractions of light. Speed. Electronic warfare systems humanity had developed specifically for this moment flooded Council networks with false data and override commands. Targeting systems locked onto phantoms. Communication networks crashed under cascading failures. The superior technology the Council depended on became a liability when humans found ways to exploit its complexity. Close-range plasma charges delivered by kamikaze drones punched through shields that should have been impenetrable. Human fighters darted between Council vessels, too small and fast for weapons designed to engage capital ships. And when Council ships tried to withdraw, they found their retreat paths blocked by human vessels that had maneuvered into position during the chaos. 23 Council ships were destroyed outright, their reactors breaching in explosions visible from Proxima Station. 7 more limped away with critical damage, leaving debris trails as they fled. The human fleet suffered losses too, but far fewer than the Council had inflicted. And crucially, they had proven a point that would echo across the galaxy. Fleet Coordinator Vexil reviewed the battle data with growing disbelief. Nothing made sense. Human ships should not move that way. Their weapons should not penetrate Council shields. Their tactics showed understanding of Council doctrine that should have taken decades to learn. Either human intelligence gathering was far more sophisticated than anyone realized, or they had access to knowledge and technology beyond what any species their age should possess. Commander Lee broadcast a message on open channels that every ship in the Ate Council fleet received. Her voice was steady, carrying no triumph or gloating, just cold statement of fact. The Council had come to contain humanity. Now they understood the cost. They could leave human space and open negotiations as equals, or they could continue and discover what humanity truly unleashed when forced to fight. This was their only warning. Back at the Council chambers, G1 watched the battle footage in real time through quantum relay feeds. The assembled representatives sat in stunned silence as casualty reports flowed in. For the first time in millennia, a younger species had not just resisted Council enforcement, but had decisively defeated it in open combat. Elder Magistrate Vexal called for an immediate escalation vote. But the unanimous certainty that had authorized the containment operation was gone. Several Council members hesitated, their confidence shaken. The Tylori delegation argued for withdrawal and reassessment. The Velix suggested opening actual negotiations rather than demanding surrender. But the Brecker representative demanded total war. His species did not accept defeat. They did not negotiate from positions of weakness. He called for the commitment of additional fleets, for strikes against Earth itself, for making an example of humanity that would prevent any other species from similar defiance. The debate raged for hours. Guy 1 listened to species that had lived in peace for thousands of years struggle with the concept of genuine military opposition. They had forgotten what real war looked like. They had grown accustomed to power that was never seriously challenged. In the corridors and meeting rooms outside the main chamber, a whisper began to spread among junior diplomats and staff members. If humans could resist, why couldn't other species? The Mekrov had grievances about trade restrictions. Ishan chafed under prohibitions on their traditional nomadic lifestyle. The Prilix resented limits on scientific research. For 3,000 years, the Council had maintained order through a combination of overwhelming force and the belief that resistance was futile. Humanity had shattered that belief. The crack in the foundation was small, but it was there. And cracks had a way of spreading. Admiral Kang received reports from intelligence assets across Council space. Subject species were asking dangerous questions. Some were even reaching out through covert channels, wanting to know if humanity would support them in demanding reforms. The galactic order was less stable than it appeared, held together by inertia and fear rather than genuine support. As Council fleets regrouped and reinforcements were summoned from across known space, both sides understood that the next engagement would be larger and bloodier. The Council could not afford another defeat without losing its authority completely. Humanity could not afford to lose it all, because defeat would mean occupation or extinction. The storm was gathering. The battle at Proxima had been the first lightning strike. What came next would determine whether humanity had secured its freedom or simply guaranteed its destruction. Either way, the galaxy would never be the same. The age of unquestioned Council authority was over, ended in 17 minutes of desperate violence in a system most Council members could not have found on a map 3 weeks earlier. News of the Proxima engagement spread across the galactic network faster than the Council could contain it. Merchant vessels carried the story to dozens of systems. Independent journalists and information brokers transmitted footage of the battle. Within hours, every spacefaring species knew that humanity had defeated a Council enforcement fleet. The narrative that emerged struck at the heart of Council authority. For 3,000 years, the established order had maintained power through a simple proposition. Resistance was futile. Young species either accepted their place in the hierarchy or faced overwhelming military force. But humanity had resisted and won. If humans could do it, maybe others could too. On the industrial world of Mekrov Prime, workers in the massive orbital factories began discussing what they had seen. The Mekrov had built much of the Council fleet's infrastructure, yet they received minimal compensation and faced strict limitations on their own military development. If humans could challenge those restrictions, perhaps the Mekrov could renegotiate their own position. Among the nomadic Shan fleets, ship captains shared the battle footage during their regular gatherings. The Shan resented Council prohibition on entering certain regions of space, areas their ancestors had traveled for millennia. They had accepted these limits because they had no choice. Now they wondered if that was still true. The Council faced an unprecedented crisis. They needed to crush humanity quickly before this contagion of rebellion spread. But the defeat at Proxima had revealed that humanity possessed capabilities no one had anticipated. Simply throwing more ships at the problem might result in more losses, further undermining Council credibility. Fleet Coordinator Thexil argued for a massive mobilization. Commit enough forces to make human resistance impossible. The Brecker supported this approach enthusiastically, demanding they be allowed to lead the assault. But several Council members hesitated. The cost of such a mobilization would be enormous, both economically and politically. And what if they lost again? The Velix Coalition proposed renewed negotiations. Perhaps humanity could be offered a compromise, some relaxation of restrictions in exchange for accepting Council authority. The Tylori Guild quietly calculated that a prolonged war would be bad for business. They began sending secret envoys to Earth, exploring potential trade agreements that would give them advantages over their competitors. On Earth, Admiral Kong met with his command staff in a secure bunker deep beneath the Pacific Ocean. Colonel Jae-Hoon Roo, the brilliant strategist who had designed humanity's asymmetric warfare doctrine, presented his analysis. They had won a battle, not the war. The Council still possessed overwhelming numerical superiority. They had technologies humanity had barely encountered, and they had 3,000 years of combat experience across dozens of conflicts. Ryu proposed a radical escalation. Do not wait for the Council to adapt and return with greater force. Go on the offensive. Not against Council core worlds, which would be too heavily defended, but against the infrastructure holding their empire together. Strike communication relays. Hit automated supply depots. And most importantly, target the ancient installations in prohibited zones that gave the Council its technological edge. President Kim authorized Operation Scattered Stars during an emergency session of the coalition leadership. Every nation on Earth understood the risks. This was no longer just about defending human colonies. They were actively attacking the galactic order itself. Failure would likely mean Earth's destruction. But standing still meant slow strangulation under the Council's blockade. Small, human task forces began appearing in systems far from human territory. Captain Sojin Park led a strike group against a Council communication hub in the Outer Rim. Her ships attacked with precision, destroying the facility before reinforcements could arrive and vanishing into deep space. Captain Tae-Young Kim coordinated simultaneous raids on 3 different supply stations, forcing the Council to spread its defensive fleets even thinner. The psychological impact exceeded the physical damage. Council merchants stopped traveling established routes, fearing human ambush. Patrol fleets that had operated on predictable schedules for centuries became erratic and nervous. Subject species watched Council ships retreat from regions they had controlled for millennia and began to question the invincibility they had always assumed. Back at the Council chambers, G1 found herself in an unexpected position. Species that had dismissed humans as primitive now sought her counsel. They wanted to understand how humans thought, how they fought, what they ultimately wanted. She realized Earth's defiance had given her actual diplomatic leverage for the first time since joining the Council. 3 species approached her in secret. The industrial Mekrov, the scientific Prolix, and the nomadic Shan all expressed dissatisfaction with Council rule. They saw an opportunity in the chaos humanity had created. If Earth continued to destabilize the Council's grip on power, these species would provide intelligence, resources, and political cover. They proposed a dangerous alliance to reform the galactic order into something based on cooperation rather than subjugation. G1 met with representatives from these species in a secure location outside the Council complex. The Mekrov offered access to their industrial capacity and knowledge of Council military logistics. The Prolix shared scientific data they had secretly compiled about prohibited zones and ancient technology. The Shan provided detailed maps of hidden routes through Council space that their trading fleets had used for generations. In exchange, they wanted humanity to continue being the chaos agent that disrupted the old order. They would work toward political reform within the Council structure, while Earth applied military pressure from outside. Together, they might force changes that none of them could achieve alone. The most dramatic strike came when Commander Biora Lee led a task force directly into the Helix Nebula. Her mission was to secure the ancient ruins that had started everything and extract whatever technology or knowledge remained. This was a direct challenge, not just to Council authority, but to the Brecker Dominion that claimed the region as their territory. The engagement that followed was fierce. Lee's forces fought both Brecker defenders and a Council interception fleet simultaneously. Human ships darted between ancient structures, using the ruins themselves as cover. Brecker vessels attacked with savage efficiency, their weapons tearing through human shields. Council ships tried to destroy the ruins rather than let humanity access them, forcing Lee to split her attention between combat and protecting the archaeological site. The battle lasted 3 hours. Lee's flagship took critical damage from a Brecker dreadnought's main cannon, losing half its propulsion and weapon systems. A third of her task force was destroyed or disabled, but the ruins were secured. Human research teams landed under military protection and began excavating, working frantically to extract data before reinforcements could arrive. What they discovered confirmed every suspicion. The ancient facility contained not just technology, but complete databases of knowledge from a civilization that had mastered physics beyond anything current galactic species understood. More damning, the archives showed that the Council's founding species had discovered dozens of such sites and systematically kept them secret from younger species. Lee managed to transmit compressed data files before her battered fleet withdrew from the nebula. The information was immediately broadcast across the galactic network through every channel humanity could access. Independent journalists received copies. Species that had shown sympathy to Earth got detailed analyses. The truth about the Council's foundations spread across known space faster than any military force could stop it. The political fallout was immediate and devastating. Several Council member species demanded emergency sessions to discuss the revelations. Junior members who had always been told they were partners in galactic civilization now understood they had been deliberately kept dependent and weak. The careful diplomatic framework that had maintained peace for millennia began fracturing under the weight of exposed hypocrisy. But the military situation grew more dangerous. The Brecker, humiliated by the loss of the Helix Nebula, demanded total war against humanity. They called for Earth's subjugation and the imprisonment of human leadership for war crimes. Other species, seeing their privileged positions eroding, supported harsh measures to restore order before the entire galactic structure collapsed. Admiral Kang reviewed casualty reports and strategic assessments with a growing sense that events were spiraling beyond anyone's control. Humanity had wanted freedom and equality. Instead, they had sparked something that looked increasingly like galactic civil war. Dozens of species were choosing sides based on calculations about the future rather than shared principles. The chaos Earth had unleashed was spreading in ways no one had predicted. Colonel Wu presented projections showing that the conflict would escalate dramatically in the coming weeks. The Council could not afford to appear weak, so they would commit more forces. Humanity could not surrender without accepting destruction or permanent subjugation, so they would fight harder. The cycle would continue until something broke decisively one way or another. As human ships prepared for the next wave of battles, and Council fleets assembled for operations that would dwarf previous engagements, the galaxy stood at a crossroads. The old order was collapsing, but what would replace it remained unclear. Humanity had proven they could fight, but they had also proven they could bleed. The price of freedom was being measured in destroyed ships and lost lives on both sides. 6 months after humanity's defiance began, the galaxy had transformed in ways no one had predicted. The Council was fracturing along fault lines that had existed beneath the surface for centuries. Several member species had withdrawn their support for military operations against Earth. Others demanded internal reforms before they would commit additional resources. The Tylori Guild was openly conducting trade negotiations with human representatives, prioritizing profit over Council solidarity. Elder Magistrate Vex Al watched the civilization he had served for 800 years crumbling around him. The careful balance of power that had maintained peace for 3 millennia was collapsing. Some Council members called for total war against humanity. Others advocated for immediate negotiations. A few had begun exploring alliances with Earth against rival species. The unified front that made Council authority possible no longer existed. Vexal made a decision that shocked the Assembly. He proposed a summit on the neutral world of Kelmer, far from both Council core systems and human territory. The summit would include not just Council leadership, but representatives from all involved parties. The goal was simple and ambitious: forge a new framework for galactic civilization before total war consumed everything built over the past 3,000 years. The proposal faced immediate opposition. The Brecker rejected any negotiation with humanity short of their unconditional surrender. Several elder species considered the idea an admission of weakness. But enough Council members supported the summit, recognizing that continued war served no one's interests. After days of heated debate, the motion passed by a narrow margin. President Da-Yoon Kim received the invitation with careful optimism. Earth's military situation remained precarious despite their successes. Human forces had won battles through superior tactics and surprise, but the Council's numerical advantage was overwhelming. A prolonged war would bleed humanity dry. If the summit offered a genuine path to peace with equality, it was worth exploring. She selected G1 to lead the human delegation. The ambassador had spent 6 months navigating the political chaos at the council chambers, building relationships with sympathetic species, and gathering intelligence about internal divisions. She understood galactic politics better than anyone else in Earth's government. Alongside her would go Admiral Sung-Min Kang and a team of diplomats, scientists, and legal experts. The composition of the delegation sent its own message. Humanity came prepared for both negotiation and conflict. They wanted peace, but would not surrender their freedom to obtain it. The summit convened 3 weeks later in a massive facility built specifically for the occasion. Representatives from over 60 species gathered, far more than the traditional council membership. Subject species that had never been invited to such discussions before now sat at the same tables as their former rulers. The very structure of the gathering challenged the old hierarchy. The first days were tense. The Brecker delegation demanded reparations for human attacks on their territory. They wanted access to the Helix Nebula ruins returned to their control. They insisted that humanity accept responsibility for destabilizing the galactic order. Several Elder Council species supported these demands, seeing them as necessary to restore respect for established authority. G1 responded calmly but firmly. She presented evidence from the ancient archives found in the Helix Nebula, showing how the Council had systematically suppressed younger species for millennia. She argued that humanity had not destabilized a just order, but rather exposed an unjust one. Earth sought 3 things: freedom to expand and explore without arbitrary restrictions, transparent access to ancient knowledge and technology for all species, and a new galactic organization based on genuine cooperation rather than enforced hierarchy. The debates stretched over weeks. Behind closed doors, Admiral Kang met with military leaders from other species. They discussed security frameworks for a new order, ways to prevent conflicts without maintaining the Council's oppressive control systems. Scientists from multiple worlds collaborated on decoding ancient technologies, demonstrating the benefits of open cooperation versus the old system of hoarded knowledge. Slowly, a coalition formed around the idea of reform. The Mekrav, Prilix, and Shan openly supported humanity's position. Several other species that had chafed under council restrictions added their voices. Even some elder species began acknowledging that the old system had fundamental flaws that needed addressing. The turning point came when the Prilix delegation revealed new data from recently discovered archives. The research team had found records from the Council's founding era that contradicted official histories. The original Council was not a benevolent alliance of advanced species guiding younger ones. It was a conspiracy by groups who had discovered ancient weapons and technology, using that knowledge to subjugate others and prevent competition. The revelation devastated the Council's moral authority. Species that had benefited from the old system could no longer justify its continuation with claims of enlightened leadership. The foundation myths that had supported 3,000 years of hierarchical control were exposed as propaganda, but not everyone accepted change peacefully. The Brecker, seeing their privileged position eroding and facing loss of face from their defeats, launched a desperate military strike. Their fleet arrived at Kelmer with intent to destroy the summit facility, eliminating reform movement leadership in one attack. If they could not preserve the old order, they would ensure no new order could replace it. The defense of Kelmer became the crucible, where the new galactic order was forged. Commander Baora Lee, stationed in the system as security, coordinated the response. But she did not command just human forces. Ships from a dozen species responded to her tactical directions, working together in ways that would have been impossible 6 months earlier. Human vessels fought alongside former Council fleets. Prilix science ships provided real-time tactical data. Mekrov industrial ships deployed defensive stations with impressive speed. Even some killer units broke with their leadership to defend the summit. The multi-species force demonstrated something unprecedented, genuine cooperation between equals rather than subordinates following orders. Captain Hyen-Woo Park, recently rescued from Wrecker captivity through a prisoner exchange, led a strike group that disabled the Brecker flagship. His ship had started everything by discovering the Helix ruins. Now he helped end the threat from those who wanted to preserve secrets and suppression. The battle lasted 4 hours. The Brecker fleet suffered catastrophic losses. More importantly, their attack provided the final push needed for consensus. Species that had hesitated about reform now saw that clinging to the old order invited chaos. If they did not build something new together, the alternative was mutual destruction. The resulting agreement, called the Kelmer Accord, fundamentally reshaped galactic civilization. The old council was dissolved. In its place rose a federated assembly where all spacefaring species had representation proportional to their population and territory. No species could claim special authority based on age or past achievements. Ancient sites were declared common heritage. Research teams from all species could access them under international supervision. The knowledge would be shared freely, ending millennia of artificial technological gaps maintained to preserve hierarchies. A mutual defense pact was established. Members would protect each other from external threats and internal aggression, but enforcement would require consensus, preventing any group from using collective military power to suppress others. Humanity gained what it sought, freedom and equality. But with that came responsibility. Earth became one of the guarantors of the new order, committing significant resources to maintain stability during the transition. They had fought for the right to be treated as equals, and now they had to prove they deserved that status dot in the final scene. G1 stood with Admiral Kang on the observation deck of the new diplomatic station orbiting Kelmer. They watched as ships from dozens of species arrived and departed, conducting the business of a galaxy, learning to work together rather than submit to hierarchy. Kang reflected on the cost. Thousands dead on both sides. Fleets destroyed. The stability of millennia overturned. He asked if it was worth it. If humanity's chaos had made the galaxy better or simply broken something that, for all its flaws, had kept the peace. G1 looked at a mixed crew working together to repair a damaged freighter. Species that had been master and subject 6 months ago, now cooperating as equals. She spoke of the messages flooding Earth, from young species that now had hope of rising on their own merits, rather than being kept dependent forever. She acknowledged the imperfection of what they had built, but argued that freedom and truth were worth the struggle, worth the chaos, worth the price. A priority transmission arrived from Earth. More ancient sites had been discovered in uncharted regions. Mysterious signals suggested other intelligent species existed beyond the former Council's borders. The galaxy was larger and more complex than anyone had realized. Kang smiled grimly. The galaxy would never forget what humanity unleashed. But the story was far from over. The chaos had only begun, and with it came both danger and opportunity in equal measure. G1 returned his smile. Humanity had not sought to conquer the stars. They simply refused to be caged. And in that refusal, they gave the galaxy a chance to be something better than it was. The old order of enforced calm had hidden injustice beneath a facade of peace. The new order would be Messier, more chaotic, more dangerous. But it would also be more honest, more free, more alive. The stars awaited, full of possibility and peril, in a galaxy that would never be the same. And humanity, the young species that had defied expectations and shattered certainties, would be there to face whatever came next. Alongside allies who had learned that freedom was worth fighting for, the Council had commanded calm. Humanity unleashed chaos, and in that chaos, the galaxy found a chance to finally be free.